So thank you very much for coming. Delighted to see you all here. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce Nexus Edge, which is, as I say, Mr. Schneider is one of the many people who've brought this to fruition. And I am not going to talk very much longer other than say thank you for coming. Thank you, Matt, for putting the time and effort into this, what is, I think, the beginning of a very interesting product. And I'm going to hand over and let Mr. Schneider take the floor from New York.
I'm tempted to say live from New York. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that kind introduction. We are actually waiting on one more colleague of ours, Mr. Dave Colantoni, who's the VP of Product Management. He is expected. He may be running behind. But the agenda for today is we're going to begin with the product launch video that we were just hearing about. This is actually a 2-minute version, not the full 9-minute film in all of its glory. It's just the 2-minute version because we want to reserve as much time as we can for the demo. Michael out of Munich is going to play that video. I think we are being joined by Dave Colantoni. So let's give him a few moments to patch in. Hello, Dave.
Good morning.
Good morning. We were just getting started. We just got a very lovely introduction from the team at Jigsaw, and I was just starting to kick things off. So I think what we're going to do is we'll begin with a 2-minute product launch video, if Michael is ready to go. And then Mr. Colantoni, I think you're going to proceed with our presentation, followed by the demo.
For over 3 decades, filmmakers, TV productions, and all kinds of content creators have used Avid tools and workflows to collaborate. The workflows were shaped by the tools themselves and by the intrinsic human need to collaborate, work together, and divide the effort amongst teammates. But then about 10 years ago, filmmakers and TV productions had a new ask. Was there a way for the workflow that they knew and were familiar with to extend beyond the boundaries of traditional brick-and-mortar post-production? Introducing Avid NEXIS Edge. The need to collaborate and the need to work from anywhere isn't new, but the global pandemic made this need that much more dire and that much more urgent. To accomplish this, we start with our core competency in post-production. Shared storage in the form of a facility-based Avid NEXIS, editing tools in the form of Avid Media Composer, and Avid shared bins, projects, and media. To enable a work-from-anywhere solution, we're adding a new Proxy Format. The Proxy Format is a sibling media format joined at the hip to every media file you have on your NEXIS shared storage. Every clip in your Avid project will now have 2 media formats associated, a high-resolution format and the new NEXIS Edge proxy. The high-resolution format is anything greater than the proxy. DNX36 could be the high-res, for example. Avid NEXIS Edge is a new solution that ties together all the post-production focused tools from Avid. Avid NEXIS shared storage, new versions of Media Composer and Media Composer distributed processing, and a new NEXIS client, all of which are integrated directly into NEXIS Edge. The objective is work from anywhere, and to bring with you the workflows and tool sets that productions have relied on for decades.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Matt. That video never gets old. I've seen it a bunch of times the last couple of weeks. I wanted to share. I'm Dave Colantoni. Sorry, I rolled in a few minutes late. I wanted to just share with you a little bit of NEXIS Edge today, and then we'll be more than happy to get into a demonstration for you, which is probably the more interesting part of the day for us here. All right, so that being said, today we're going to talk about some new products and capabilities that are being built into our products today, and we're launching the product called Avid NEXIS Edge. We're pretty excited about this. It's something we've been working on for quite a long time here at Avid. We based a lot of information from some of our customers, some of our resellers, and really tried to, and also looked at the needs of what's been happening around the world, particularly with the pandemic and the work from anywhere type of scenarios that are going on today. So with that, Avid NEXIS Edge is really a new post-production solution from Avid. It allows teams to work and collaborate from anywhere. So this means productions and teams can be interacting pretty seamlessly with the tools that they know and love. It does replace the product editorial management. Some customers have this today. Many customers are familiar with it. So you'll see some similarities with the product and particularly with the web browser, but really the technology that sits behind NEXIS Edge has been completely renovated and revamped and is brand new, essentially. Now, there's some key themes you're going to hear me say over the next couple of minutes. One is familiarity, products that our customers know and love and are not changing workflows. So we really had set forth to make sure that we hide the technology in the background. We allow them to use the tools. We allow our users to use the tools that they're very familiar with, including Media Composer and Avid NEXIS. And this product is really, as much as it's presented as a Media Composer sort of front-facing product to the end user, there really is a lot of behind-the-scenes NEXIS things that we've been renovating, hence the name Avid NEXIS Edge. And finally, it does integrate with Adobe Premiere. And I would say that Adobe is more of a complementary product today. In the future, we will build out more functionality so that it can work seamlessly, much like Media Composer can. So this product is actually built for post-production teams. It supports a wide variety of roles, and there's different ways that you can support roles within Media Composer and the web browser that we'll talk about in a few moments. The roles, of course, in a post-production environment span very many types of technical or people that are producers or showrunners. So editors, assistant editors, story editors, producers, showrunners, post supervisors, executives, anyone that sort of needs to interact with the production can use either Media Composer, a simplified Media Composer using Media Composer Enterprise, or the web browser. The capabilities are very extensible, and I think what's important here is that we realize we're not changing the way you work. So editing is the same, searching, finding content, logging and tagging, those are all the same. The web browser allows some ability to do string out, shot lists, rough cuts. And there is some lightweight review and approval that's inherently built in because we use the same bins, NEXIS, Media Composer, even the web browser. They interact seamlessly with marker support and a few other items. Now, we really have had this working internal working document, and we've actually exposed it as a marketecture in the past around Avid's post-production pipeline solution. And this really means that we have some common themes that we always want to follow. One, allow the user to work from anywhere. Two, allow you to collaborate and work with anyone seamlessly. Three, don't change the tools you love. Obscure the technology in the background and really allow the people who need to be creative, who need to review content quickly, who need to make quick decisions, to have those tools that they're very familiar with without a lot of complexity that sits in front of them and rather behind them. And that means we really want to uncomplicate your workflow. Now, it goes without saying that we have some very robust products at Avid. Media Composer, of course, is now, I think, 33 years old this year. And of course, it's proven and tested and tried in the industry, as you all know. But Avid NEXIS has also been on the market for a number of years now, and it is really a very comprehensive solution and very reliable. It's very extensible too, and that means that we have taken this file system and extended it to beyond capabilities that you would expect from an on-premise storage solution and taken workflows to the cloud. We've taken that file system that you know well, and it works in different ways, and it's very robust and very powerful. That allows us to optimize media workflows. It allows us to be very secure and efficient. It allows us to drive collaboration, and it really allows our customers to feel safe, to know that the products that they're going to use are going to work for them when they need it to work, because it really is one of the key components of a lot of media and entertainment workflows today. So essentially, where this product, what it comes down to and how you use it are in 3 different ways. One, Media Composer Enterprise. Media Composer Enterprise is the highest end of Media Composer, and there's reasons, and I'll talk about this in a moment with my little wheel of functions that we're going to go over. But Media Composer Enterprise is the product that this gets exposed in. There's a Nexus Edge web client, which is a lightweight browser interactive UI that allows you to do some of the functions I talked about a little bit earlier. And of course, you can host that web client within Adobe Premiere and have some of the capabilities that present itself. So the wheel of key components, and here is really where the rubber meets the road here for functionality. Everything is sort of based off of a couple of key elements here. One, a proxy. Now, wow, there's not really anything innovative about a proxy, I can assure you of that. However, there is innovation in the way that we have used the technology in the background to present the streams of video to the user. And we've spent a lot of times both within this proxy and both within the Nexus client to optimize that experience. So the new proxy allows you to create, playback, and edit using a new media proxy format. What's nice about this is we are actually streaming the proxy. We're not downloading it unless you want to. So everything is literally playing off your Nexus, just like a user would expect it to be wherever they're located. That's all done because we've done some creative things within the Nexus Client Manager. So the familiar mounting of workspaces by an editor is the same no matter where you're located. And that technology that we really have integrated in the Nexus Client Manager is done behind the scenes. So the user doesn't even need to realize what's been going on there. They can use their Nexus Client Manager as they always have. Now, we've taken some of the best collaborative elements around bin and project sharing, and we've moved the technology so that it's available remotely, and it's available no matter where you're located. So you can interact seamlessly with users that are located on-prem, in a production center, in a post-production house, post-production facility, but also at their home and at multiple homes. So bin locking and shared bins and projects are all seamlessly working together, just like you would expect it to. Now, excuse me. So there's another product called Media Composer Distributed Processing, and we really have leveraged the power of this. This is a great product that allows the user to offload tasks to a background rendering service or a consolidate service or a proxy creation service. So this is a product that runs in the background inside of Media Composer. It comes alongside a Media Composer Enterprise, so it's not a separate purchase, it's actually part of it, but it's a key element of how we want to create the proxy files. The web client connector, this is important because this is where I sort of tell you how the users connect to the Nexus Edge services. The web client connector is one connector. This is that web browser that I talked about a little bit earlier. So you can connect directly to the Nexus Edge services and seamlessly work, like I explained, around string outs or logging or viewing clips or whatever it might be. There's 2 other things that connect through an editing connector. One is Media Composer Enterprise, 2 is Adobe Premiere. So you can choose your creative tool. These are the elements that really allow the proxy workflow and all the elements around it, the whole Nexus client interactivity, all of that gets exposed with this editing connector with Media Composer. Now, some customers said, I want to work air gapped, so please allow me to download my media if I want to. So we've created a way inside of Media Composer to gather up all your projects, bins, and media and just copy them pretty seamlessly wherever you're located, which is great. Now, some customers do this because they want to be disconnected. Some customers do this because they don't have the internet connectivity to even stream media files, but they have enough where you can still leverage bin and project sharing. So you can actually have your media located remotely. You can actually use media that's located remotely and mix and match if you want to. Edit away. You can still use some lightweight internet connectivity to leverage the bin and project sharing that we talked about a little bit earlier. And all of this functionality really runs on and is driven through a Nexus Edge file server. You know, this is just a graphical view of sort of how it all plays out. You have a post facility, you have an on-premise editor, there's a firewall, there's encrypted transfers, the remote user is working from home, and they seamlessly interact with wherever the other users are located back to that facility where your Nexus is located and the server that's driving all the services. And this is really some of the things that I explained about a little bit earlier. All right, now that being said, I wanted to cruise through that because you're going to actually see this all live. I'm going to hand it over to the team here to give you a demo. Take it away, Matt, Corey, and Kent.
Thank you, Dave. So we're going to actually get started with Corey. So Corey is going to represent the on-prem part of the workflow. I will then demonstrate the browser part of the workflow. And finally, Kent is going to demonstrate the Media Composer remote part of the workflow.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Okay, yes, so as Matt said, I am the on-prem person. I am playing the role of the person inside the facility, and I am starting out here in the Media Composer project selection window. I just want to point out a couple of new things. So down here, I have in very bright green, you can see Avid NEXIS Edge. And this basically, if I get to this window and this is bright green as it is, that tells me that I'm connected to Edge. I don't have to do anything else. And what that means is that as long as this is green, I can open my project and utilize the proxy workflow that you've already heard about and that we're going to show you more of. Now, and my point being is that I don't have to log in. As long as this is green, I do not technically have to log in to take advantage of proxies. However, if I want to utilize distributed processing, and if I want the web connector panel inside of Media Composer, then I do need to log in. So that's the login here. And that is my Nexus login. I don't need a separate login for this. I just utilize my Nexus login there. And if this square here is green, then that means that I'm also connected to those components, DP and the web connector. So as we get into the project, there's just a few things I want to show you that are new. You know, one of the main things here with this new workflow is we didn't want to change too much. You know, we just added some functionality, gave you new capabilities without changing too much in the tool that you know and love. So I have a cut here in my timeline. And one of the big new things related to Proxy is the ability to right-click in your player button and switch between high resolution only, proxy only, proxy preferred, and high resolution preferred. Now, I'm the on-prem person, so I obviously can use the high res. That's probably what my preferred resolution will be. But just for the purposes of demonstration, let me switch to proxy only and show you a couple of things. You'll see that proxy unavailable is coming up because the clip that I'm parked on in the timeline and the clip that I have loaded in my source monitor are both missing proxy. You'll see later on in the demo with Kent that there's also a high-res unavailable slide, and he'll talk about that a little more. You also see that my timeline is bright orange, and as I scroll through it, you'll see that I do have proxy for these clips. So any of the clips in the timeline that are orange, that means that they have proxy. And if we click here and do find bin, and it brings me over here, you'll see in my bin that I have several clips with orange clip color icons. And so that is another new thing. So that orange clip color in the bin here, as you can see, translates to the timeline, and that is an indication that I have proxy for those clips. If I switch this to proxy preferred, you'll see that I now can play this clip because there is proxy for this clip. And if I hit play on it, you'll see that I have an orange play button. So lots of ways for us to alert you. You are looking at proxy. I have an orange clip in the bin, orange in my timeline, and an orange playback button. A couple other things here. I have a proxy offline column, proxy audio, proxy video, and then a proxy path, which tells me where on the Nexus my proxies are. So these 4 columns are new. Now, what if I need proxy? So I can simply right click on a clip here and go to create proxies. It defaults to a local drive. If I choose a drive, a workspace rather, on my Nexus, I then get the ability to utilize distributed processing. And then I can subsequently choose the queue of the distributed processor, DP, that I want to use. I click OK, it kicks off the job. I get the DP status window comes up. That is done very quickly. And now if I reload this clip, you can see that I have an orange clip icon here. And if I play it, I get an orange play button. Okay, so, and that's about it as far as new tools to be aware of inside of Media Composer. And I think at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Matt.
Thank you, Corey. Let me grab the screen. All right, can you all see my web browser?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining today. We're really excited that you guys could attend in person. What a novelty. I look forward greatly to when I can start to see customers and clients in person. But for my part of the demo, I'll be talking about the browser part of the Nexus Edge solution. So the browser, which is something that we effectively inherited from the editorial management foundation that we are building on, the browser is a tool set that is a lightweight representation of all your content on Nexus. It's largely designed with a few personas in mind, so producers, showrunners, post-production supervisors, maybe even executives, anyone who needs to see the content. Maybe they need to make notes, maybe they want to add markers, they might even want to do some basic shot list editing. They want to do that in a lightweight tool, and they may not necessarily need or even want all the richness and the depth of Media Composer itself. So we wanted to make sure that there was a tool for that part of the team, and that's why we have the browser. The browser requires no software installation whatsoever. You launch it inside Chrome, and as long as you have a secure connection to your storage, whether you're on-prem or remote, you have access to the browser and the entire tool set within. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see all my Nexus workspaces represented. So this is a browser-based representation of everything that is on Nexus, and I can turn down and see my folder structure here. So production name, season, episode, shoot date, and so on. All these top rows represent the actual Nexus workspaces themselves. Now, for this part of the demo, I'm going to demonstrate how I can find my rushes, throw them into a bin, and prepare the content to make it available to the editing team. And since I'm doing this inside a browser, since I can work from anywhere, I don't need to be near the editing team itself. I can do this from anywhere. So in order to show this, I'm going to park this over here. I'm going to browse to some new content that was copied in. Okay, so let's see, I think we have some new footage that was just copied for our demo inside a camera. All these shots here, these are raw clips. They're not sitting yet in a Media Composer bin. These are just camera files, shall we say, inside a generic folder created by the human element. Now, if I want to make this available to the editing team, I need to make a bin. So I'm going to right click and choose a new browser instance, and I will drill down into my project. Notice that when I get into the root level of this project workspace, I think everybody present knows that most of our customers and clients like to have a project workspace where they put all the projects. That project workspace tends to be small, it tends to be slim in size, and they'll put Word docs and Excel docs and projects and so on. That's what we're looking at here. Notice that I now see Media Composer project folder icons. These aren't generic folders, these are the actual Media Composer projects represented here in the browser. If I drill down even further, I see bins. Now, we completely follow the same business logic that we've had for over 20 years when it comes to share bins and projects. For example, if I jump over to an on-prem Media Composer, this is an on-prem Media Composer running on a good old Mac system out of our Boston-based office here in the US. If I open up this bin here, notice that I have a very familiar green padlock. That means I have write permission to the bin. This is a language that I think everybody here speaks. Then if I toggle over to the browser and hit refresh, notice that it is now red. So the browser is following the lead of what's happening in Media Composer, but that's also bi-directional. If I then close this bin, and then go back to the browser and I hit refresh, it goes blue. So this browser is really in touch, it's in sync with what's happening inside the world of Media Composer, and Media Composer to a great extent is in touch and in sync with what's happening inside the browser. So in order to get my rushes into a bin so that editors and assistants can actually start to work with it, I'm going to make a bin. Now I'll pause and say that this is the only tool in the world that can make a Media Composer bin other than Media Composer itself. In the browser, if I right click and choose create bin, I'll call this a camera, a cam. All right, so I create a bin. All right, so I'm not creating a facsimile of a bin, I'm actually creating the real deal. So if I double click, I have an empty bin. If I want to link my sources, my camera sources directly into the bin, I will drag everything directly into the bin, and there I just linked everything right inside the Media Composer bin. All right, let's see if I'm telling the truth. If I then go back to this and open up, whoops, excuse me, wrong bin, hit refresh, there's my A camera bin, and I have all my clips inside the bin. All right, so I'm going to go back to, let's close this so I have write permission on the bin. I'm going to go back to my Media Composer bin. Now that I have everything mapped into a bin, if I'm a producer or if I'm a story editor, I may want to start to tell a basic narrative. So I can just stop at throwing things into a bin and then sharing that with the team. They could be anywhere. They no longer need to be just in the brick and mortar facility. But I want to take this a little further. I'm going to do a basic shot list or a rough assembly or a rough cut to give the editor a general idea of what narrative I'm trying to tell. So I'll grab a few shots here. I will right click and I'll choose create sequence. Now, this may be a statement of the obvious, but the ability to create a sequence or a shot list or a rough assembly right inside the browser is really meant for that persona, the producer or the story editor. This is not intended at all for a genuine craft editor. If you need to do real editing, obviously you're going to be inside Media Composer. My purpose here is I'm just beginning to tell the story or at least give the editing team some suggestions of what footage I want them to use from a producer standpoint. Now once I'm in this dialogue, I can do some very simple vertical storyboard editing just by moving shots around. I'll give this a name. We'll call this rough cut V1, and I will hit submit. Sequence is finished. Click there, and I will hit refresh, and I will get a timeline. So if I open the timeline editor, hit refresh again, there's my rough cut. Load it into my player. Now I have a basic shot list. I can park my player and hit play and start to review the rough assembly that I have here. Now, if I want to take this a little further, there are some basic editing tools available in the browser. So I can do some very simple trim editing, trim that, outgoing, incoming, drag this to the tail, drag this to the head, and etc. So again, the idea here is that a producer can start to build their narrative, start to do a really loose assembly. And once I've done that and it saves, a Media Composer editor can open up that bin and continue to work with it. Now, let's say I have interview footage. I conducted interviews of my subject. I did the interviews. I know what was said in the interview, but I need help in terms of finding that content. So to do that, I'm going to use our search app here in the browser, and I'm going to use the phonetic indexing technology that's available inside Nexus Edge. Now, anyone who's used the Media Composer phrase find functionality will certainly be familiar with this workflow. The phonetic indexing tool set is basically scraping all the audio and it's associating it with your search criteria. So if I choose phonetic, and I'll choose in the last week, and let's say I want to do a search on, I believe the interview subject may have said something about no relink. Yeah, that sounds familiar. I wonder who said that. All right, so one of the big things about Nexus Edge is the proxy and the high-res, as we're showing here today. We have the ability, because of a new technology called the Proxy Resolver Service, to switch between the high-res and the proxy without a relink and without a conform, which I think is a pretty unique thing. As somebody who spent a lot of time in post-production massaging and finessing kind of the relink nightmare that you get in not just our own tools, but other tools too. It's that way in Flame, it's that way in Resolve sometimes. This is a zero relink workflow. So we've got a few hits here, so I'll load this up. and I'll go to the hits tab, and it looks like it found some hits. The blue dots represent where the phonetic technology found a match to my search criteria. My search criteria was no relink. So I'm going to zoom in this a little bit so it's a little easier to see, and I will park right there at the blue dot. Now, if I turn up my audio, let's see if the phonetic indexing technology did its job. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's click on this next one. Okay, I seem to really mean that because I say it a few times. I'll come over here. Let's see if the phonetic indexing found it again. Okay, we get the idea. So the phonetic indexing toolset is finding content based on my search criteria. That's really useful. I can even make a subclip, drop it into my timeline, and then hand the baton to a craft editor. The last thing I want to show as part of the browser-based part of the workflow before I hand it over to my colleague Kent is, as a producer, inevitably, I'm going to want to review content that's been edited inside Media Composer by a craft editor. So let's go find some of that material so I can do some basic notes. So I believe if I have, let's see, let's go back to my project workspace. Whoops, wrong one. Here's my project workspace. I'll go into the project, and I believe we have a sequence here. So if I load this up, no, I don't need to save. Here is a sequence that an editor has actually started to work with inside Media Composer. In addition to just playing it down, I can actually add some markers. The markers are then written into the Media Composer bin, and I can add additional markers so that they can see what my comments are based on watching it. So if I click on Storyboard, you can see that there's some markers here. If I click on each marker, that advances the playhead. So, but I want to add some new markers. These must be markers that another producer added. I'm going to add some markers of my own. So this shot, let's say I want the grade change, so I'll add a marker here, and I'll say brighten the grade. Looks like somebody said the same thing before. Hit return, and then I'll find some more shots here. This is a little bright, so we want to tone down the grade. All right. And then here at our finale, I think this is a great shot, so I'm gonna say this is a great shot, etc. You get the idea. Once these markers are added, they're written directly into the Media Composer bin, and I can see that, or a craft editor can see that inside Media Composer. All right, so at this point, I think I'm done with my part of the demo. Just to recap, the browser is really for the producer, the story editor, the post-production supervisor persona, so they can review the content, make bins, throw stuff into bins through a link, even do some basic rough assembly, add markers, and so on, and be a part of the collaborative workflow, and be a part of the collaborative workflow from anywhere. Again, no software to install, open up the browser, connect through your secure VPN, and you're off and running. So on that note, I think I'll turn it over to Kent, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'll share my screen now for everybody, and hopefully everybody can see my screen. Actually, let's just stop for a second, sorry. Make sure everything's good. Can everyone see my screen? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, on my side, I just want to clarify something for everybody. The system that we're actually using is actually located down in our head office in Burlington, Massachusetts. As you can see in our videos, we all have our names where we are located. I'm actually located in Canada, Toronto. So I'm acting as the remote person. I've logged in through the VPN, so we've connected to our network down in Burlington. I am going to show you a couple of different things. So I'm on the Media Composer at my house. So this is installed on my system. I'm not using RGS or Teradici or anything along those lines. The big difference in my scenario is that when I launched Media Composer for the first time, it would look at my latency to determine whether or not I'm going to be a remote client. And some of the ways that you can determine this is, number one, first thing, when I VPN'd in, I launched my connection manager. I connected to our Nexus that's down in Burlington, and I have set my connection manager to remote Avid NEXIS. What this is doing is it's basically telling the system that, hey, you don't expect 1 millisecond of latency. This is going to have more latency getting to the Nexus. Therefore, expect a different kind of result of streaming. Okay, so if we actually look at my system here, I'm having actually a not bad day. I got 30 milliseconds. Yesterday I had 34 milliseconds. So that's indicating my latency directly to the edge server or to the Nexus. Okay, it's not going to my provider, it's going right to that actual server itself. So on this side, really, that's the only difference that I've done other than what I would do on-prem. I logged in with my same user, I have my same workspaces mounted, and I'm good to go. Now, when I launched Media Composer for the first time, and I just went right into the project to save some time, it basically will notice that and it'll say, hey, you have high latency. And would you like me to check off the remote button? So when Corey showed you originally the project window and had the Nexus screen there and she logged in, there was a little button that said remote. So what that would do, it would automatically check that off for me so I wouldn't have to worry about checking it off by myself. If I had to, that's fine. You just check it off and you hit OK. And that basically throws the Media Composer into a remote mode. Okay. So I'm in Media Composer. This is Media Composer Enterprise, just like Corey was running. I'm in the exact same project that Corey was in. I have the same bins, as you can see here. And I have, all the bin capabilities. So this one was just sunk again. I have locked bins here. If I want to open up the sequence that Corey had open, I can double click on here. Now, what's very familiar to everybody now is when Corey had right-clicked on here, she had specified that she had high-res media, right? Well, if I put high-res only media, you can see my whole timeline goes back to the high-res color, and I have a new slide, right? High-res not available. And that's basically because I'm in a remote mode. I don't have the capabilities of trying to stream it. Whereas when you're on-prem, you have that luxury of either using high-res or proxy or a combination of the two at that moment. So if I go proxy only, you can see in my timeline here, basically I have certain clips that are proxied, certain clips that aren't, right? And if we go into our bin, you'll notice here up at the top again, we have the orange, we have the same columns, we have some that aren't. So Matt showed you, actually, I'm not sure if Matt showed you, but ultimately, Corey could generate proxies. We can also generate proxies within the web browser itself. But here I am now in Media Composer. I don't want to contact Corey or anything. I need to generate proxies. So I have a couple of different things I can do. I can multi-select these clips if I wanted to and say create proxy, or I could go to this actual sequence itself and just right click and say create proxy, okay? So if I do that, at this moment, I'm basically in a situation where I have to use distributed processing because all my high-res media is in Burlington, okay? I don't have anything on my system currently to be able to generate proxies from, and we don't want to pull the high-res here, generate a proxy, and then throw the proxy back. So by picking the job queue, and so I've created some job queues with regards to our distributed processing, because distributed processing is not just for generating proxies. It can be used for output, transcodes, mixdowns, consolidates as well. So, and renders too. So I can just say here, click OK. So what this is saving me the time now is not going into my bin, trying to locate all those individual clips. What it's actually doing is it's processing them all out for me, everything that was in that timeline. Okay, so you can see that actually happens really quickly. And now when you look at my timeline, it's all been updated and I now have proxies for all my media. So if I go to play this back, I have that full capabilities now. I won't have any frames come up. So very nice that I don't have to ask anybody to do these renders for me. Now, another thing too is, right, that's important and it's been asked for over and over again is the capabilities of doing multicam remotely. So if I happen to pick these 9 cameras here and I go and say create group, and I'll just use endpoints in this particular case, and we'll just double click here and we'll load up the multicam. So I have a 9-way multicam. So to give you a little bit of perspective with regards to the proxy itself, proxy ranges between 4 megabits a second to 6 megabits a second, depending on your audio that's associated with it. So if you have 9 ways, basically it's going to be multiplying that number by 9 times. Once again, that number is relatively small based on most people's bandwidths these days. But of course, latency is going to have the big impact on this. So how it's going to play back and so forth. So you can see, I have a 9-way multicam. Obviously, I can also, have my capabilities of going in and modifying, my multicam, just like I would have the capabilities, whether I was on-prem or not, mixing media. If I didn't have the proxy, I would just create a proxy for it and away we go. So I have all that flexibility with regards to continuing working as I do on premise. Now, one thing to note, and I think Dave mentioned it, I can't remember 100%, but in some instances, right, we might have a bad network connection. So maybe I hit play and this just doesn't play the way I want it to play. You have the capabilities of bringing media to you. So say I'm working and my network's kind of going up and down, it's acting really weird. I can right click on a bin, for instance, and I can say copy media to me. Now, what that gives me the capabilities of doing is a couple of different things. So if I was just having a bad network day, I could go and say, hey, bring the proxies to me so that I can continue working, but my project's just going to continue syncing all the time, right? Because the media is going to be in both locations. And ultimately, I still have a network connection and I'm working on the same project as everybody. Or if I decided, I'm going to go work in the cabin in the woods kind of atmosphere, one of Matt's favorite sayings, I want to go and download maybe my high-res media or my managed media or my proxies. And by doing this, what I can do here is I can say I select manage media. Then what it's telling me now is I'm going to need 738 megabytes of storage in order to accommodate that and the bin. As you can see, where to copy media to, I can designate any drive on my system to be that location. And then it tells me how much space I have there to make sure that I have an adequate space. Then I can also have my bin copied in a different location too. So this is super handy in the sense that I want to disconnect from the world. Now, on top of this, you might be in a situation where maybe you're shooting stuff in the field. We have a good internet connection, and I want to go in here ultimately and incorporate some media into the timeline, okay? I can still do that. I can take media here. I can use my source browser as I always do. So if I use my source browser, I can navigate to an internal hard drive that had some, cards on there. I can incorporate that in my timeline. Obviously, if somebody opens up that sequence that's on-prem or in another remote location, the media is going to say offline. It's not going to have the standard, proxy not available or high res not available. It's basically going to say media not available because I haven't copied that media back to the on-prem location. So as a remote person, I can work with local media and the remote media. I just need to make sure at the end of the day, I either copy proxies back to the server or high res back to the server. Currently in version 1, the way to do that is either drag and drop it through the Finder through the Nexus Connection Manager, or if you had a spare or something along there that was already set up to go in specific locations, you could use that kind of thing to accelerate movement. But I have that flexibility to mix it, and that might be a case where I might say use high res preferred, just like Corey had done earlier, because I have high res on my hard drive, and then it would use proxies from on-prem. Okay, so that's another super handy tool that I have flexibility of using here too. Now, another thing too to mention, right, when I did have this window up here, this is the same window ultimately that Matt had in his web browser, right? So if I wanted to go here and I wanted to say, hey, let's find everything done in the last hour, I could click this, and these are all the clips that Matt had put in to his project, right? That wasn't even the same project that we were working on right now. So if I wanted to incorporate one of those things, I could just double click on it and it would load it up. It would basically load up his bin right into my project for me, okay? So that's another handy part of basically having this. Now, what you're noticing here is Matt hadn't generated any proxies for that particular clip. As an instance right now, it looked at the system and made sure, oh, okay, yeah, there is clips somewhere else. So the resolver resolved it and said there is actually proxies for it, and it brought it forward to me. So I've incorporated, basically, if you look over on the far side here, under Avid NEXIS bins, a bin from Matt's project within my project, okay? So I don't have to now go and navigate through projects and find it. I have that luxury of using the browse within the within Media Composer through the panel itself. And I can phonetic search like Matt was doing. I can search through metadata, so forth and so on. Now, what happens if, I've done my edit and, it's looking good, but, it needs to get checked out somewhere. Like I need someone to check it out. Well, there's a couple of different options I can do. If I right click on here, I can go output and export using distributed processing. Okay. So in this instance, so if I just said export using my local machine, what it would do is it would export it in whatever fashion I decided, but it would use the proxies for that output. If I want to use the high-res media, basically I would say use DP, distributed processing. So in this case, if I wanted to do an MXF, say I just wanted a low-res, ProRes 422, I want to put it onto my Nexus storage, and I'm just going to put it into Kent's exports here. And we're just going to call this E10 because we've had to do this a lot of times. And I hit save. Oh, first thing I want to do also is make sure my job queue is set up. Now, job queues, I'll talk about in a second, but basically this is where you can specify different machines to be used for different tasks. So I'm going to say use the export, and I'm just going to say save and export. So at this point, what it's doing is it's just communicating back to the DP servers, and it's going to go in here and it's going to start to process this out. So you can see it's processing out that timeline for me. And once it's finished, I'll be able to check it out. Now, what's great about the fact of using distributed processing, since you are getting it for free anyways when you buy Media Composer Enterprise, is the fact that I could export out multiple sequences and not tie up my editor at all, right? So it gives me a lot more flexibility and get things done faster and faster. If I actually just go quickly just onto my actual computer itself here, and I go into the Edge links, and if I go to Kent exports, you'll see there's basically the export that just happened. And in that particular case, to use the high-res media to generate that ProRes file for me, and I could distribute it however I needed to. So whether it was a finished piece or whether it's just something I need someone to proof to look at, really easy to take advantage of using these additional sources that you're going to get. Now, I just want to really quickly, just on the distributed processing side, just to make it clear, I'm just logging into the web browser for 2 seconds here. The way we have it set up is I have it set up as job queues. You could have one job queue, and then in one job queue, you could have it do proxies, transcodes, consolidates, mixdowns, renders, and video and exports, and just put all your machines to that one job queue. Or you could do something like we did here, where we created, we used 2 different machines that are specific for proxies, one machine that actually has 2 worker nodes on it for all the transcoding stuff, and then one for the export. And the reason you might do something along these lines might be because your machines that you have are varying in quality. Some might have GPUs, some might not have GPUs. So they might work better for certain tasks within the Media Composer world. So this just kind of gives you a really brief look at the way you can set up distributed processing. But what's very important to understand, especially when you're on-prem, you do not have to use distributed processing, or even when you're remote. You can use your local machine to generate these proxies. Distributed processing is just that added feature that you get when you get Media Composer Enterprise. So at this point in time, I'm going to relinquish this, and we're going to do some Q&A for the folks. Thank you.
And Kent, thank you. So actually, before Q&A, I'm going to be a little unorthodox, and I'm going to grab the screen back for one other bonus feature I completely neglected to show. So if no one minds, here's my encore performance to show something that I think is quite relevant to the workflow. Actually, Kent, you reminded me that I didn't show this, but one of the new aspects, one of the new features of the browser is the fact that I can create proxies, or I can trigger a proxy creation job from within the browser. That is part of how a producer or any team member can help the team get set up for an edit. So if I find a particular shot, let's say this one here, I can load that up, I can hit play. I like this shot. I want people to have access to this content outside of the brick and mortar facility. I can actually right click and choose create proxy. So if you can see that, it says create proxy, and upon doing so, I get a dialog where I can point the proxy creation process to a particular workspace. I'll point it to the Edge Proxies workspace, and I can choose a job queue. This is the job queue that Kent was just showing in his remote export workflow. I'll choose a proxy, the proxy queue, and I'll hit create. Files are being submitted, and if the proxy already exists, it will skip it, which is a nice thing. As you can see here, it says one media file has been submitted. That tells me proxy is not available for this particular clip. So I can grab a whole bunch of clips and choose create proxy. I can also step out of the bin, and on the bin, I can right click on the whole bin and choose create proxy for the whole bin. And I can go one step further. I can step out of the bin to the root level of the project and right click and choose create proxy. This is another way we leverage the render farm workflow that is Media Composer distributed processing. Now, the browser itself certainly does not have an encoding engine. That's why we are leveraging DP worker nodes, which are back at the facility with a traditional connection to Nexus storage. Once I choose create proxy, it will send a job to the DP queue, and it will pick as many worker nodes as you've defined in your DP setup window, the window that Kent was just showing, and I can make proxies back at the facility even though I'm remote and trigger that job right from the browser. I want to add that the system will not create proxies redundantly, meaning if you already got a proxy file, it'll just skip it. So a rushes workflow or a dailies workflow could be that literally every morning after new content is copied to your Nexus storage, I can right click on the whole project and just say create proxies. It will only create proxies incrementally for anything I don't yet have a proxy for. So I'm sorry for the encore performance. I just wanted to make sure that I could show that creating proxy is something that doesn't just exist inside the skin of Media Composer. I can do it right here in the browser. It does require that I have DP worker nodes, which again is a background render farm type solution, and I can send proxy creation requests or jobs to the DP queue right from here in the browser. So sorry for that. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that I added that because I certainly think it's relevant to the workflow. And on that note, I will stop my share and we can probably move into questions.
So we've got a mic here.
One quick question.
Sorry,
I'm sorry. We're going to come back to me for one moment because there's an important element here that we finished the demo with, which is actually the pricing.
Always be selling, Dave. Good man.
Exactly. So I wanted to just go over because we're going to get questions on this, so I might as well just head it off at the pass here. So pretty much we've tried to simplify this as much as we can. Now, you may have noticed we referenced Media Composer Enterprise as a reason for that. The editing connector that I referred to earlier comes as part of Media Composer Enterprise. The editing connector for Adobe Premiere is $599 US per year. It's a subscription, $79 per user per month. So you can just, if you need to use it for a few months, you can do so. The web client, the Nexus Edge web client, $299 per year per user, $39 per month. And then we also have the phonetic indexing option. I'd recommend that if you have interest in that, come back to us. Now, the other question everyone's going to ask is why Media Composer Enterprise? What we tried to do is make it super simple. We could have allowed everyone to just buy an upgrade from a perpetual. We still have a bunch of users on perpetual or on Media Composer Ultimate, and then add on the editing connector, add on the distributed processing, add on floating license. It was just easier and, quite honestly, much more economic for everyone to just move to the enterprise version. A subscription for Media Composer Ultimate today is $499. The editing connector is $599. We give it to you for free as part of Media Composer Enterprise. And a DP worker license is $199. Right there, you're already to the cost of Media Composer Enterprise. So the way this works is everything's piled into this high-end Media Composer Enterprise subscription. And that includes Expert Plus support, floating license support, phrase find script sync, Symphony, Cloud VM for remote collaboration, distributed processing, and you get a worker per one worker license per editing license, and you also get the distributed processing engine that helps you create the proxy, and that's required. You need to buy that. You also get something we don't talk too much about is you can tailor the Media Composer Enterprise user interface or settings for a particular user. You can actually have a producer who only sees a simplified version of Media Composer and deploy that same thing, that same interface to multiple users within the team. Or you can deploy a full editing user interface to multiple people. You could have multiple sort of roles and user interfaces being deployed so that it's tailored to the person who's using it. A production intern may have a simplified user interface. You don't want them to have access to everything. Maybe they need to do some training before they move on to the full Media Composer. You can deploy a special interface for them. That means that you can do some administration that includes even some secure aspects of it. You could turn off export, for instance, if you needed to, so nobody would be able to export content directly from Media Composer. And also, of course, it gives you all the proxy and edge support that we just talked about. So that's pretty much how we're approaching it, trying to make it simple on the productization of it. So I'll hand it back to you. Sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you, Dave. That was great. So basically, Nexus Edge is free, is what you're saying.
Have a yes, it is free if you have a Media Composer Enterprise license. That was the honestly, we wanted
That's the takeaway.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, Enterprise is great. I mean, you can also restrict it to you know, particular codecs, or not codec, you know, kind of, you know, a particular format, can't you? So if you've got offline editors who you want to only, you know, digitize or use, sorry, show my age there, use a particular bit rate, you can restrict that. So it gives you, as a facility, a lot of control over what people are doing and how they're using the software.
That's true. That's true.
So,
And
sorry, good. It's quite tricky, isn't it, doing the kind of remote to throw? I just realized we brought you all here for a Zoom session in person. It's fantastic. Pulled it off effortlessly, didn't we? Thank you very much, guys. That was brilliant. I think it's a great, and it's a very, in a good way, a very low impact release. I think you get a huge amount of functionality for a very modest amount of disruption. And I just want to make a couple of points. And there was a quick kind of hands up thing. Who is running Media Composer Enterprise already in the audience? People with enterprise license agreements. Okay. Who is running the modern, terrifying version of Media Composer? And who's got kind of editors who are worried about it? Or hang on, let me simplify that. Who's reluctant to run the latest version of Media Composer UI? Okay, right. So I guess for you guys, the bad news is this, obviously Nexus Edge runs in the current, you know, as in about to be released version of Media Composer. So if you like what you saw, then you're going to need to get over the reluctance. One of the bits of good news is we are about to bring out Roger Shufflebottom's very great book on how to take the pain out of that transition for both you guys and all editors. It'll be free, it'll be Jigsaw branded, and it's coming soon. So if you have got people who are kind of concerned about the transition, generally speaking, I mean, if you guys are if you hang out on the Avid Editors of Facebook page, the general consensus is a lot of whinging, getting into it, and then fuck me, why didn't I do this sooner? So, you know, if you are concerned about it, yeah, everyone's the consensus is, why on earth didn't I do this 2 years ago once they've got over the hump? So we're going to bring the book out to help you get over the humps. If you want copies of it, we will be bringing that forward to anybody who wants to use that. So we're going to do questions, I think, for anybody who've got questions. So we've got a microphone here. If you want to just pass it to, oh, you're closest, aren't you, Jess?
What's the resolution of the proxy?
I can take that. So regardless of what the source format is, the proxy is always HD. It's 1920 by 1080. Set aside for a moment any non-16 by 9 rasters like DCI flat or DCI scope. So setting that aside for a moment, the proxy is always 1920 by 1080. The codec is H.264. The video essence is at 3 megabit. The audio is encoded at AAC. In AAC, and the encoding bit rates range from 24 kilobits to 640 kilobits, depending on the number of audio tracks you have and their sample rate. So just in terms of budgeting, so to speak, from a bandwidth and performance standpoint, you should budget for about a payload of about 4 megabits. Capital M, little b. So 4 megabits, that's the proxy. So if you have a 8K source or 4K source, the proxy is HD. The proxy will follow the lead of the raster. So if you have DCI flat, DCI full, DCI scope, et cetera, 239, 185, it will also be that raster as well. In terms of project types, just to complete the question, complete the answer, we support every project type from 23976 to 60p and all the progressive frame rates. We support 1080i 50, 1080i 5994, and 4 of the 720p projects, 23, 24, 25, and 2997. The project types we do not support with this first release are project types exceeding 60p as a frame rate. So there's no support for 120. We're not supporting stereo 3D. For this first release, we're starting with the dominant and most common project types. I hope that answers the question.
So for those of us who are currently Ultimate subscription customers who are in the middle of a 1 or even a 3-year subscription, what options are available, if any, for upgrade, or are we expected to abandon our current licenses and buy new ones?
Dave, do you want to grab that one?
I couldn't quite hear the comment. I'm sorry.
So for those of us that currently have Ultimate subscription licenses and we're in the middle of a 1 or a 3-year subscription, is there an option to upgrade to Enterprise, or do we have to abandon our current licenses and buy new ones?
Yeah, there's ways for you to cross-grade your Ultimate to Enterprise, and we can true up your investment that you've already made. If you've already prepaid it, for instance, for a year, we can work with you to fix that. We do that all the time. And there's actually if you go from a perpetual license to an Ultimate, I'm sorry, a perpetual license to a Enterprise or an Ultimate to an Enterprise, there is a special cross-grade price for that. That gives you a discount.
Anybody else got any questions?
Yes,
Rich, good man.
Hi, Matt. It's Rich from Gorilla. You?
Hey, Rich.
Hi there. Just 3 questions, actually, just more clarification. The air gap workflow working in the cabin, is there any kind of automatic syncing in the pipeline? Somebody records some guide VO, not a manual media movement, but some kind of syncing that can go back and forth. Or is it just manual? Actually, I'll give you all 3 because you can whip through these, I'm sure. That's number 1. Next one, the proxy generation. Is there some way of setting that a more watch folder level, or hit generate proxies on a project level, but then if somebody's ingesting all overnight, it's just going to happen just some way, almost where you can set up the Nexus workspace to always generate proxies, not right click individually. And then can Edge be connected to multiple Nexi?
All good questions. Thank you, Rich. I'll work backwards. For this initial release, the Nexus Edge server can only index 1 Nexus system at a time, but we get that question routinely. So clearly there is a customer need and a customer interest in one server being able to index more than one storage environment. Certainly that is something that we want to explore in the future. It would make sense to do that. It would certainly add more value to the server. And one thing I'll add the note that obviously we are exploring for the future putting Nexus Edge in the cloud. Can't commit exactly to when we're going to be able to do that. For this first release, Nexus Edge still runs on a physical server, but it would be silly if we didn't explore with a great degree of seriousness putting Nexus Edge in the cloud. When it's in the cloud, that may offer some affordance in terms of being able to index more than one Nexus storage environment at a time. These are all things that we're exploring as part of the future of the product, but I certainly recognize that there's a need for that. The second question was automated proxy creation. So for this initial release, proxy creation is indeed a manual process. You're either kicking that process off manually inside Media Composer, or you're leveraging DP, and DP is doing the work for you, but the trigger point is the human element. For the next release, we'll have the obvious thing, which is a project-wide setting inside Media Composer. So select this checkbox, and that checkbox means that any media creation, you just get a proxy. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to tell the software to do it. It just does it for you. So that is going to be in a follow-on release, automated proxy creation. And we're also exploring the watch folder workflow, because so many encoding solutions out there have watch folder approaches. It's kind of in the vernacular with these kinds of things. It would be silly for us not to consider that. In terms of the syncing workflow, Rich, you're talking about when you're air-gapped, is it automatically pushing content back to Nexus? I'm sorry, I missed the arc of the question there, Rich.
Sorry, Matt. Yeah, if you are air-gapped for whatever reason, let's just say it's a bad internet day and you have your local proxies, and simply, let's say you just record a guide voiceover locally.
Oh, I know what you mean.
And then somebody back at base has to make a proxy and upload it to the exec. Just some way of making it a bit more automatic than having to really understand your media management and pushing media back and forth.
Yes, so syncing incremental media, anything that you do when you're disconnected, is going to come with a follow-on release. Absolutely. There will be a sync solution without a doubt. So right now at the moment, if you create additional media and you're air-gapped, you must manually push that content back to Nexus, so it's on shared storage, so it can be available for collaborative purposes with the team. With a follow-on release, there'll be absolutely a sync solution, and that will sync anything that's new, anything that wasn't there when you first initially copied it down. I do want to add one bit of color to that so-called air-gapped workflow. The air-gapped workflow really serves two purposes. One is if you are air-gapped because you choose to be, it's the cabin in the woods workflow. It's also if you are mandated because your production company has content security concerns, so you have to be air-gapped. One thing that is fully supported with this release is if you use the copy workflow that Kent was showing, you can copy the media down to a local hard drive, but if you still have connection to the server, you just have poor internet, insufficient internet, inconsistent internet, and you really just can't get sustained, meaningful playback, you can leave the project and the bins on the Nexus workspace, but have the media, the proxy media, or the high-res if you want, on the local hard drive. That's not a science experiment, that's a fully supported workflow. So the media can be on the local hard drive, but the project and bins can remain on Nexus. You still have bin locking, you still have all that collaboration. You don't have to lose that collaborative workflow, even if your internet connection is poor. You put the media on the local hard drive. That's a supported workflow. I hope I answered the question. And good to hear from you.
Does proxy create, or is proxy creation an additional ingest process on top of creating your normal standard in editing proxy, DNX36 or whatever, DNXLB, or can you do proxy creation from linked clips?
Yes, you can. So we do support creating proxy media directly from a linked clip. You are not required to make managed media first. So a lot of productions in general don't put camera raw, camera original content on Nexus. That's just stylistically, culturally, that's something that most productions, that tends to be the workflow of most productions, certainly in my experience with the New York-based clientele that I know. So you don't have to make DNX36 or DNXHRLB first and then make a proxy. You can just make proxy directly from your link source. That would probably be the use case that would resonate the most with the nonfiction folks. So nonfiction, reality television, and so on, their shooting ratios are so through the roof and they're so high. In general, they don't necessarily want high res on shared storage because shared storage is an expensive asset. They want to manage that as efficiently as possible. They only want their editing media that they're cutting with on Nexus. So the workflow for that kind of production would be you connect your local hard drive or whatever, however camera content comes into the post environment, and you can link and directly create proxy from that, unhook the hard drive, stick it on the proverbial shelf, and work directly from the proxy media. So if you switch via the playback button in Media Composer to high res, it will say offline, but hopefully that will be logical and will make sense because you don't intend to have the high res on shared storage. So you don't have to have high res is the point. You can go directly to Proxy. Supported workflow.
Matt, we were talking earlier a couple of days ago about this. Obviously, the proxy workflow now labels you, if you're a totally in-house setup, to use it to proxy 8K media on your in-house Nexus. So you can, instead of being a remote workflow, it's just a way of creating, instead of doing the DNX36, you just dispense with the whole DNX36 thing and just use proxy now. So if you've got high res and you want a lightweight because you haven't got enough bandwidth in your storage, you can use the proxy workflow for that in-house. Exactly. You can,
It's designed to be an editing format. So it can replace DNX36 if you need to be more efficient in terms of your storage utilization. It's designed to replace, believe it or not, the standard definition formats that a lot of reality TV shows still cut in today. They're still cutting in 14:1, they're still cutting in 15:1s, which is incredible, but they do it because they need to maintain a trim storage footprint for high shooting ratio workflow. So this is designed to be an editing format. It's not just about remote, it's not just about streaming. It is a create once, use twice strategy. Make this format for both craft editorial inside Media Composer and streaming to the browser. So yes, this can be your new dominant editing format by design.
So,
hey, Matt. Oh, sorry, I've got a question about proxy metadata management as such. If you delete a master clip, I'm assuming you get the option to delete the proxy, or you can delete the proxy by itself?
Yep, you have the same granular control with the delete dialog that you do with traditional media workflows. There's a checkbox there for proxies. If you delete, highlight a clip, hit delete, you can choose to delete the clip, the high res, the proxy. You have complete granular control.
Are the proxies still controlled by the standard databases?
Funny you should ask. Not entirely. When you are on-prem, I believe the PMR and MDBs are still in play. When you are remote, for all kinds of reasons, PMRs and MDBs are not used because that is too costly from a performance standpoint. So we're using a different way of phoning home to the Nexus Edge server to know that proxies are available and to queue that up into the Media Composer player. By the way, on that note, I wanted to mention that proxy media does not pass through the server itself. That would make for kind of an unfortunate bottleneck had we done it that way. We don't do it that way. The proxy media is played directly from Nexus storage, point to point, by design. So we don't want the proxy media to pass through the server. That would create for a bottleneck. But I believe, forgive me, I forget exactly what technology we're using in lieu of PMR and MDBs when you're remote, but the reason for that decision at an architectural level was that reading and writing PMRs, MDBs, which we all take for granted, is actually a little expensive from a performance standpoint. It's appropriate for on-prem. It's not in our best interest in terms of remote workflows where performance is of concern.
Hi, Matt. It's Rich again.
Hey, Rich.
Hi. I'm just thinking back to XDCAM now. Just interesting, that idea of AMAing and linking and just using the proxies. Any possibility in the future of being able to use full res audio, proxy video?
That's an interesting question.
It was the XDCAM issue, wasn't it?
The XDCAM
proxy audio and then having that ability to use me. And I can't imagine why you'd generate the audio without the pictures, but at some point, if you want your just proxy on-prem low storage, I haven't made DNX36, but somehow I want the full audio, some way of just being able to use proxy audio, proxy video, full audio.
Okay, so you're talking about the legacy optical disk workflow.
Already, Rich.
Yeah, the old optical disk workflow, I certainly know that well. At the moment, no, we don't have support for that optical disk, that Sony optical disk workflow where you took low-res image and high-res sound. No. However, there is one footnote to that. Looking ahead, the Resolver service is really the center of our universe in terms of Nexus Edge. And in this release, we are supporting two formats connected to one clip, high-res and proxy. But looking ahead, there is an opportunity for the resolver service to point to 3 formats or 4 formats or more. That resolver service technology is extremely lightweight, does not put a lot of computational strain on the server itself. So you could have other workflows that you want to address. You know, it would be very logical if you have Camera Original, a high quality mezzanine, you know, ProRes 422, DNxHR, HQ, and Proxy, and you can toggle between those 3 depending on what your needs are. I suppose, Rich, you could have what you're talking about where you have Proxy Picture, high-res audio. If you were to have something like that, that wouldn't be in the service of remote playback, but as I think I heard you say, if you're just intending to play that on-prem, yeah, I see the relevance there and I see the use case. So that's a good thought, a good suggestion. We just don't have that with this release.
So in the environment where you're working remotely, if I've understood you correctly, the H.264s are streamed into the remote media composer or the web interface.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably they're encrypted. So I imagine you don't need a VPN, but the media is fully encrypted. And I guess if you guys been audited by the studios in terms of content protection.
This is a pretty important thing to talk about. For this initial release, unfortunately, no, that proxy media is not yet encrypted as a file at rest encryption. Encryption is available through the VPN for this initial release. So what you can do is you can use a third-party tool set like, oh gosh, help me out. What's the company?
Fortium.
Thank you. Yes, so a third-party tool set can encrypt the content at rest. We are certainly exploring how one of those third-party tools that provides an encryption at rest, that's the critical difference. We're exploring an integration where when you make proxy media inside Media Composer or in DP, it's encrypted upon creation. So if you use the copy workflow and you pull it down to your local hard drive, you don't have to sweat about content security. So that kind of integration is something that we're exploring. We actually have had some conversations with some third-party companies already about that workflow.
People like Media Seal, yeah. So right now,
yes.
You've got safety in VPN, but nothing. So yeah, at the moment, you wouldn't want to use it.
At present, that is true. That is true.
So, sorry, but even in the case of Media Seal.
Yep.
So even in the case where you're using a product like Media Seal that would encrypt at rest, traditionally, you would decrypt in order to stream. So the video traveling across the internet to your remote system, is that encrypted? Or is
the encryption is the only encryption currently with this first release is supplied by the VPN layer, if I'm answering the question.
So no, but if it's within your VPN, you should be in control, I think.
If it's through the VPN, you do have that level of control. If you do use the copy workflow, just to be completely clear about it, if you use the copy workflow and that file is pulled down to a local hard drive, at rest, that content is not encrypted. So, which is why, and we recognize that that's a critical need for many kinds of productions, certainly in the scripted market. So that is not lost on us. We absolutely have to have that. So that's definitely a part of the roadmap.
Sorry, I've got a follow-up question for that. I assume you can put it onto any drive and anyone could walk away from that with that drive as well. You can't define where that media goes to on location.
You, in the copy dialog lets you define whatever hard drive you want to point it to. You're not constrained to, there is no constraint onto where you can copy that content. So if I'm answering the question, you can copy that to any generic hard drive. If that was the question.
Is it on?
Yeah, you're on.
It's actually the other way around. Can you lock drives off? Can you specify only one location for it to go to?
No, not yet. Not yet. But a very good thought and something we have talked about internally. So no, that would actually be an interesting aspect of our Media Composer Enterprise administration capability where you define and control to what volume you can pull media down. Excellent thought. We don't have that yet for this initial release.
I've got another question, which is, I don't like the idea of producers grabbing clips with terrible audio, how does it deal with synced audio within clips? So if you have a WAV that's synced on a clip.
I'm not sure I follow the question.
When you're in the browser, you were grabbing media from a very sort of base level. How does it deal with synced audio from a WAV recorder that's been synced up to several cameras and things like that?
Well, if you're in the browser and you open up a bin and you have are you talking about a .sync clip inside your bin?
Yeah, something with synced audio from like a PIX recorder or something like that.
Sure, it follows the lead of the content in the bin. So if you have synced audio, this syncing relationship is not defined by the browser toolset. It's defined by Media Composer. So presumably an assistant editor is syncing camera or the picture element to your second system audio and creating a .sync clip. And if you create a proxy for that content, that's what you'll hear in the browser.
Okay, cool. Cheers, thanks.
You bet.
Guys, and then it's beer and pizza time, I'm afraid, and Matt's got to go and do the next release of Nexus Edge.
Where's our beer and pizza?
Hey, dude, hop on that plane.
I'm ready.
Just educational, is there educational pricing, and also if those enterprise licenses are available on a licensing server as the previous licenses were?
Dave, do you want to talk about the educational pricing?
We don't have educational pricing just yet, but we will have it within the next couple of weeks. It'll be we do have educational pricing for enterprise. All we need to do is create it for the web browser, but it will be inexpensive.
Did you say free, Dave?
It won't be free.
Oh.
Media Composer Enterprise, though, is relatively inexpensive for Edu right now.
So you got one more question, Paul. Go for it.
Paul Hernandez, BBC. From Avid's perspective, where will this leave your existing remote collaboration tools? You know, namely Meeting Central for cloud and things like
that. It's just a complement to that, actually. Honestly, it depends on the workflow. It depends on your needs. We have a full cloud deployment for Edit on Demand today that's completely remote, which contains all Media Composer and Nexus in the cloud. All your media is in the cloud. And that has a specific use case that we've assigned to it. This is built for post-production workflows. Media Central tends itself to be more scalable for larger teams, maybe in a broadcast or news environment. There's a whole bunch of different use cases. This isn't the beginning. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of us really building out a whole complement of products for remote workflows, particular markets, users, and use cases.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thank you very much indeed, the guys from Avid. I'm afraid, yeah, we've failed to order you the virtual beer and pizza, I'm afraid. So we're going to have to say thank you very much. And we're going to hop off. Everyone's got lots more questions. If you've got any questions, particularly around the deployment of Media Composer Enterprise, distributed processing, we've got various kind of packages we can offer you to help you deploy both enterprise, floating license servers, distributed processing, all of that complexity that it looks like this brings into your lives. We're here to help. So we can talk about that offline. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Avid guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you all soon.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.